Hey, what's going on guys? RVZ Stealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best top lane champions for Preseason 5, patch 4.21. And I just want to let you guys know that once again, the order I place the champions in doesn't really matter too much. If they're on my list, then they are a strong pick right now. So at the number 5 spot, I have Lissandra, Prosta Lissandra, or she's got really strong poke, and she's a really good top laner because she doesn't really have that great range. Like, her only ranged ability is her Q, which is why she's not too great in the mid lane because she gets outranged by a lot of mid lane champions. But in the top lane, because she can go up against a lot of melee champions, her short range really doesn't matter too much because she can just poke her opponents down with her Q, and then when they get to low enough HP, she can just go in with her E and then stun them and then usually pick up the kill. She's also got tons of AoE damage. All of her spells do AoE damage actually. And she's got amazing wave clear as well with her Q and her E. She also has pretty strong mobility with her E as well. And she's strong at all stages in the game too. Her passive is also great for laning because she doesn't run low on mana very often, and she's also got really great CC. Her Q, her W, and her ultimate all provide some sort of CC, and she's also really hard to focus in teamfights because if you build Zhonya's on Lissandra and you use your ultimate on yourself, you're just going to be untargetable for a very long time. And Consta Lissandra, her AP ratios aren't the best. So next up on my list, I have Gnar, Prosta Gnar, he is a very strong laner. He's also got great kiting potential with his Q because it offers a pretty good slow, and it's also on a very short cooldown if you can catch it. His Mega Form is also really strong, and you want to be trying to find team fights when you're in Mega Form as Gnar because this is when he is at his highest potential because he's got so much CC in his Mega Form, so you always want to be trying to find fights in Mega Form rather than in normal form. He also can build tanky and still do a lot of damage, and he's got very few counters in lane as well, and he's also strong at all stages in the game. Consta Gnar, he heavily relies on Mega Form, so I'd recommend communicating with your team and let them know that to not engage unless you're in Mega Form, and let them know that when you do get Mega Form that you're going to be looking for an engage because you are just going to be missing out on a lot of Gnar's CC and his potential if you're fighting when he's in normal form. And he also does have a shorter auto attack range, so if you're going up against champions who have like a long range CC, for example like Pantheon, or somebody that actually has a longer range CC than your auto attack range, then make sure that you're being careful so that you're not getting jumped on by them. Next up on my list, I have Rumble, Prosta Rumble, he is strong even when behind. So if you do fall behind his Rumble, there's always a chance for you to come back because of his ultimate. And if you can get a good ultimate off in a team fight as Rumble, then it could completely change the game into your favor. He also has great AoE damage with his ultimate and his Q, and he's a fairly strong laner as well because of his passive. He is also great in close quarters areas because if you're fighting in close quarters as Rumble, it's going to be a lot easier for you to line up your ultimate, and it's going to be a lot harder for the enemies to escape from your ultimate because if you're fighting in the jungle, there's a lot less space for the enemies to escape. He also has very strong zoning potential with his ultimate, and he's got very short cooldown abilities as well. Consta Rumble, his ultimate can be hard to land. If you're not familiar with the champion, I'd recommend playing him in some normals and getting used to using his ultimate because even I find myself missing my ultimate as Rumble often. And if you are missing your ultimate as Rumble, you're just missing out on a lot of his kit. However, if you can land it, then he's just such a strong champion, and he's got so much potential with his ultimate. And he also has weaker mobility, so you gotta be careful that you're not pushing too far out of lane, and if you are, that you're making sure you place down a ward. So number 2 on my list is Malphite, and he's making his appearance for the first time on my list because I've been playing him a lot recently, and I've found that even though he does have a little bit of a weaker early game, that when you get to mid game and you get to team fights, his ultimate is just so strong, and as long as you don't give up any kills in the early game, you can carry games because of his team fight potential. So he's got a crazy strong ultimate, and if you can land his ultimate on multiple targets in team fights, then you're going to be able to win a lot of team fights. He's also super strong when ahead because he's an engaged champion, and if you get ahead with Malphite, then you're always going to be able to look for engages with his ultimate. He is also a late game monster, and he's a bruiser as well. He can build tanky and still do quite a bit of damage. He's also got really strong CC with his ultimate and his Q, and he's strong against AD champions because if he builds armor, he's actually going to gain damage from that, because the more armor you get, the more damage your E does. Cons to Malphite he doesn't have any mobility. His Q does give him a speed boost, but most of the time that's not going to save you from a gank, so make sure you're warding if you find you're pushing out in lane. He also is pretty weak when behind because he's an all-in champion, and if you do fall behind his Malphite, then you're not going to be able to find those engages with his ultimate. And he also does have mana problems early, so I'd recommend picking up a Crystalline Flask to make sure you can sustain the early game. So number 1 on my list for Preseason 5 patch 4.21 is going to be Aurelia, and Aurelia has been number 1 on my list for I think like 3 or 4 patches in a row now, but I really do think that she is still one of the strongest top lane champions. She has a 2-second stun, which is just so strong if you can get that off on an enemy squishy come late game, because you're going to be able to burst them down before they can even get out of the stun. She's also got very few counters in lane, and her passive is also very strong for team fighting because it gives her a lot of tenacity, and it's going to be very hard for the enemies to target her in team fights because of that. She also does true damage, so she's a pretty good pick against tanky champions. And she's a bruiser as well, so she can build tanky and still do quite a bit of damage. She also has an insane mid-game power spike because when you pick up the Triforce as Aurelia, it just synergizes so well with her, and she's going to start to do a lot of damage when she gets that. She is also pretty easy to play as well, in my opinion. She's hard to master, but she's pretty easy to pick up on because she really doesn't have any skill shots other than her ultimate. However, there are things like jumping to minions to get the last hit to refresh your Q, and there's other little tricks that you can learn as Aurelia, but overall I think she is pretty easy to play. Cons to Aurelia are her ultimate's damage isn't that great. If you can land all 4 of them on the enemy, then it does decent damage, but if you're only landing a few of them, then it really doesn't do much. And her E cannot always stun, which isn't the best, but if you know how to play Aurelia and you can always stay at a little bit lower HP than your opponent, then you will be able to get your stun off on them most of the time. So honorable mentions for this patch include Jace, Fiora, Wukong, Riven, Kennen, Vladimir, and Rek'Sai. So Rek'Sai is actually a pretty strong top lane champion. If you can't play him jungle for some reason, then he's a pretty good top lane pick, but I'd recommend playing him jungle first because he has pretty strong ganks in the jungle, and you're kind of missing out on that if you're playing him top lane. But he's got really good sustain with his W, which makes him a pretty strong top lane pick. Jace is always going to be a strong pick for top lane unless he gets some sort of a nerf, because he's really strong against melee champions and he can poke them down pretty easily, and he also scales really well into the late game. Fiora is more of a situational pick. I would never first pick her, and I would never pick her into enemy teams that have a lot of CC because she's really squishy, and if you are going up against enemies that have quite a bit of CC, then it's going to be hard for you to get in and do a lot of damage. Wukong is also a pretty strong top lane pick because he has a really strong ultimate, and if you can get past the early game and get into team fighting as Wukong, then if you can land a good ultimate in a team fight, it could completely change the game. Riven is also more of a situational pick because she does have quite a few counters. However, if you can find the right matchup with her, then she does snowball really hard, and she can carry games pretty easily if you can find the right matchup. Kennen is also a pretty good pick right now. He recently got some decent buffs last patch to his ultimate, and I think to his W as well. He definitely got buffs to his ultimate, which make him a stronger pick now, and he has always been a pretty good pick because he counters a lot of the melee champions top lane, but with these recent buffs that he got, I definitely think he is a lot stronger right now. Vladimir is also a pretty good pick for top lane right now. He's got strong sustain in lane with his Q, and he's got a really strong late game as well. If you can get to late game as Vladimir and you can land your ultimate on multiple targets in a team fight, then it's going to do a load of damage. He also does pretty well in lane against melee champions, so if you're going up against a melee top laner, then I would definitely recommend picking Vladimir because he can poke them down really easily and have a really easy laning phase. So that is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're wondering why I didn't include a certain champion on my list, then be sure to comment below asking me why, and I'll get back to you on that shortly. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.